The Galactic Council chamber was a place of light and sound, floating high above the twin suns of Devara Prime. Its walls shimmered like liquid gold, reflecting the glow of alien constellations. The air was warm, filled with the low hum of thousands of voices speaking in different languages, clicks, roars, whistles, deep tones that seemed to vibrate in the bones. Captain Ilara Vance stood at the edge of the great hall, her boots resting on a floor of transparent crystal. Far below, the city stretched like a web of lights across the planet's surface. Around her sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy, tall, feathered Zyrans, insect-like Zilthar, with razor-sharp mandibles. The silent, floating Vorathi, whose bodies glowed faintly blue, and in the back row, almost hidden, sat the humans. Humans were newcomers. Barely 50 years had passed since Earth had been invited into the Intergalactic Alliance. The older species called them the short-lived ones or the loud ones. To most aliens, humanity was a species of impulsive children, useful for manual work and small missions, but never trusted with anything truly important. The Prime Speaker of the Zilthar clicked his mandibles and spoke, his voice sharp and precise. We face an invasion. The Zorth Dominion has crossed the Ort Rift. Their fleets are cutting through border worlds. This is a crisis for experienced civilizations. The words hung in the air. Several alien delegates turned their eyes, or what passed for eyes, toward Ilara. Their glances were quick, dismissive. Ilara kept her face calm, though a quiet anger burned in her chest. She had commanded the Horizon's reach through asteroid fields and pirate ambushes. She had trained crews to fight in zero gravity, to survive in the frozen dark of space. Yet here, in this shining chamber, none of that mattered. Her first officer, Mason Hale, stood beside her. His voice was low, meant only for her ears. They think we're just lucky apes with guns. Ilara didn't answer. She watched the council vote. One by one, the glowing symbols above each delegate seat changed color. Decision made. The humans would be kept far from the front lines. Their orders: guard supply lines, transport resources, and stay out of the way. The real fight would be left to the experienced. The session ended. Delegates left in a swirl of colors, scents, and sounds. Ilara stayed for a moment longer, looking out at the twin suns through the great glass dome. Mason waited beside her. They don't know us, Mason said finally. They don't know what humans can do when we're cornered. They'll learn, Ilara replied. Her voice was steady, but inside, something was tightening. Later, back aboard the Horizon's Reach, the crew gathered in the command room. The holographic map of the Ort Rift spun in the air above the table. The rift was a strange region of space, a place where hyperspace was unstable, where sudden storms could tear ships apart without warning. To most captains, it was a nightmare. To avoid, Ilara studied it closely. She saw something different. The rift wasn't just dangerous, it was unpredictable. And unpredictability could be a weapon. She didn't share her thoughts yet. Not with the crew, not with Mason, not with anyone. Instead, she gave the official orders they had been assigned. The Horizon's Reach launched from Devara Prime, its silver hull catching the light of the suns as it cut through the black. Around them, the void stretched endlessly, silent, vast, and cold. Days passed in quiet routine. Supply routes were dull work, scanning cargo holds, checking life support systems, listening to the hum of the engines. But tension lay under every moment. Reports came in through the Alliance comms, planets burning on the edges of space, stations vanishing without distress calls, patrols lost without trace. The Zorth were moving fast. Too fast. One night cycle, Mason found Ilara in the observation deck. She stood alone, looking out at the distant shimmer of the rift. Thinking about the war, Mason asked. Thinking about how we're not fighting it, she said. Mason was silent for a while, then he stepped closer. The rift is dangerous. Everyone avoids it, but you're looking at it like you're planning something. Elara didn't deny it. She turned from the window and faced him. If the Zorth come this way, we can't outrun them. But maybe we can take them somewhere they've never been. Somewhere their precision doesn't matter. Her voice was calm, but in her eyes there was steel. A week later, the Horizon's Reach received a coded signal from an Alliance relay station. Unknown ships had been spotted on the edge of their assigned route. The message ended abruptly, as if cut off mid-transmission. Elara stood on the bridge, the crew tense at their stations. Set a course, she ordered. Let's see what's hunting in our waters. The ship glided silently toward the source of the signal. Outside, the stars shifted. The glow of the rift began to fill the viewport, an oil-like shimmer in space, bending light in impossible colors, and then the sensors found them. Dozens of enemy ships emerged from the dark. Long, sharp, black as obsidian, with trails of green fire spilling from their engines. The Zorth moved in perfect formation, their presence filling the comms with a low, pulsing hum. Not words, but a predator's heartbeat. They had come for an easy kill. Mason's voice was tight. Captain, they've found us. Lips pressed into a hard line. Good, she said. Let's see if they can catch us. The hunt had begun. The Horizon's Reach hung in the cold void like a silver spear. Inside, the crew worked quickly, their voices low but sharp. Red lights pulsed across the bridge. Warning of danger. The Zorth fleet was closing in. On the main screen, the enemy ships looked like black knives, their edges shimmering with an unnatural green glow. They moved with terrifying precision, each one turning at the exact same moment, engines firing in perfect unison. It was like watching a school of deadly fish in the depths of an alien ocean. Mason Hale stood at the navigation console, his fingers moving fast. They're faster than our interceptors, he said. If we run in a straight line, they'll be on us in minutes. Elara Vance's eyes stayed locked on the tactical display. We won't run straight, she said. Bring us toward the rift's outer edge. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Everyone knew the rift was unstable. Hyperspace storms could appear without warning, swallowing ships whole. The Alliance avoided it for good reason, but Elara wasn't Alliance. She was human. The Zorth changed formation, spreading wide to encircle them. Their lead ship sent out a deep, resonating pulse, a sound that felt like it reached into the bones. A predator announcing the start of the hunt. Gira Sol, the ship's science officer, looked up from her station. They're scanning us. They know we're alone. They think they can take us without resistance. Mason gave a dry laugh. They're not wrong, unless you've got a trick, Captain. Elara's mouth curved slightly, but her eyes stayed hard. Oh, I have a trick. It just might kill us. The first plasma volley came without warning. Green bolts ripped across the darkness, tearing through the void and lighting up the Horizon's Reach's shields in blinding flashes. The deck shook violently. Several crew members were thrown from their seats, shields holding at 70%. Kira shouted. Return fire, Elara ordered. Blue energy bursts streaked from the human ship's cannons. They hit the forward shields, sparking like lightning against glass. The enemy ships barely flinched, closing the distance with frightening speed. Captain, 2 more enemy wings entering from the port side. Mason called. The Zorth were tightening their net. Soon, there would be no way out. In the observation bay, the rift loomed larger. It didn't look like normal space. It shifted and shimmered, its surface rippling with impossible colors. Deep, violet, molten gold, and a green so bright, it hurt the eyes. It felt alive, like some massive sleeping creature waiting to wake. Kira's voice was tense. Captain, if we get too close, the gravitational eddies could tear the hull apart. Elara didn't take her eyes off the rift. If we get too far, the Zorth will tear us apart instead. Another blast rocked the ship. The shields dropped to 50%. Fire suppression drones zipped through the corridors, spraying white foam where sparks burst from ruptured panels. Engineering to bridge, came a voice over comms. We've lost stabilizers on Deck 3. Divert power from secondary life support, Ilara said without hesitation. Keep us moving. The Zorth closed to attack range. Their ships moved like a wall of blades, pushing the horizon's reach toward the rift. To them, this was already over. A lone human vessel. Damaged, weak shields. They were certain the prey would fall quickly, but they didn't know what it meant for humans to be cornered. Captain, they're locking weapons, Mason shouted. Good, LRS said. Now, take us in. The horizon's reach dove toward the rift. Space around them began to twist. Stars bent into strange shapes, stretching and curving as if seen through water. The ship's alarms screamed warnings about gravitational shear. Behind them, the Zorth followed. Kira's console lit up with chaotic readings. They're trying to maintain formation, but the rift's pull is breaking their precision. On the screen, two Zorth ships drifted too close to each other. Their black holes scraped, and the contact sparked a green fire that bloomed across their shields. Another ship swerved sharply, caught in an invisible current, and vanished into the rift's shimmering surface without a trace. Ilara's voice stayed calm. Bring us close enough to the rift's edge to make them think we're desperate. Then cut power for 3 seconds and let the current pull us past that singularity swirl. The horizon's reach floated in the quiet after the storm. The crew moved through the corridors in silence, repairing panels, patching wiring, sealing cracks in the hull. Every face carried the same look, relief mixed with the weight of what they had just survived. On the bridge, the rift still glimmered through the main viewport. It looked like an ocean made of light and shadow, shifting colors with every heartbeat. Sometimes it pulsed slowly, like it was breathing. Other times it twisted violently, swallowing pockets of space into nothingness. Kira Sol stood at her station, scanning the rift's unstable edge. Numbers scrolled quickly across her screen, glowing blue in the dim light. Her brow furrowed. Mason. Hale entered from the lift, carrying 2 steaming cups. He handed one to Ilara Vance, who was leaning over the tactical console. Repairs on decks 2 and 3 are almost done, Mason reported. Hull integrity is holding at 80%. Ilara nodded, but didn't take her eyes off the rift. And the Zorth? She asked. Kira answered, without looking up. What's left of them jumped to hyperspace. But she hesitated, fingers tapping the screen. I picked up something strange before they left. Their flight patterns, they weren't random. They were following navigation markers. That means they knew exactly where to chase us. Mason frowned. How would they get that data? The Rift's charts are restricted to Alliance Command. The 3 of them exchanged a quiet, heavy look. There was only one answer. Someone in the Alliance was feeding the Zorth information. A comms ping broke the silence. The image of an Alliance officer shimmered into the air. A tall Varathi, with skin like pale glass. Captain Vance, you are ordered to return to Devara Prime. Immediately, the Varathi said in a flat voice. Council review of your actions is required. Ilara kept her tone polite but firm. We're still repairing damage from the rift encounter. Travel to Devara. We'll have to wait until your delay is unacceptable. The Varathi cut in, Captain. Your reckless maneuver endangered not just your crew, but valuable Alliance property. You will answer for it. The transmission ended abruptly. Mason muttered under his breath. They're more worried about property than lives. Ilara straightened, her jaw set. If someone on the council is helping the Zorth, going back now would just make us an easy target. We're staying in the field. Kira turned her screen toward Ilara. Captain, I've been studying the rift's currents. The gravitational eddies don't move at random. They shift in patterns, almost like tides. Ilara leaned closer. Meaning, Kira said. If we map those tides, we could predict where the dangerous currents will form. We could move through the rift safely, and anyone chasing us wouldn't. Mason's eyes widened. You're saying we could use the rift as a trap? Kira nodded. Exactly. Elara considered the idea. The Alliance would never approve too risky, too unpredictable. But humanity's greatest strength wasn't playing safe. It was adapting faster than anyone expected. Run the simulations, Elara ordered. If it works, I want a course. Ready? Hours passed. The crew worked in near silence, only the hum of the engines, and the faint crackle of the rift filling the air. Finally, Kira looked up, her face pale but determined. It's possible, if we position ourselves here. She pointed to a glowing point on the map. We can lure enemy ships into a current that will scatter their formation. Once they're separated, they'll be vulnerable. Mason gave a slow, impressed whistle. It's risky as hell, which means it's very US. Before they could test their theory, the sensors blared a warning. Kira's voice was sharp. Multiple hyperspace signatures. Zorth ships, closing fast. Elara stepped to the center of the bridge. How many? 6? No, 8, Kira replied. 2 destroyers, 6 escorts. Mason's hands tightened on the helm controls. They found us quick. Too quick, Elara didn't need to say. What they were all thinking, the traitor inside the Alliance had told them where to look. The rift swelled on the screen, its shifting colors casting strange shadows over the crew. Elara's voice cut through the tension. We don't run. We test the plan now. Mason, bring us into position. Kira, track the currents. The horizon's reach turned sharply, its engines flaring blue as it dove toward the rift's dangerous corridor. The enemy followed, confident, closing the distance with their flawless formations. Kira called out readings in a steady rhythm, her voice almost blending with the hum of the ship. 2 seconds to tide shift. 1 second. The rift's surface rippled violently, sending a wave of distortion through space. The lead Zorth destroyer swerved slightly, breaking formation. Another ship drifted too close to a current and spun out of control, disappearing in a burst of green light. The horizon's reach slipped through the narrow safe path Kira had mapped. The crew held their breath as the ship's hull groaned under the gravitational stress. One by one, the Zorth ships tried to follow, but their perfect precision was their weakness. They couldn't adapt quickly enough to the shifting currents. 2 more ships vanished. Another collided with an escort, both bursting into fiery debris that scattered like sparks in the void. By the time the human ship cleared the rift's edge, only 3 Zorth vessels remained. They turned sharply and fled into hyperspace. The bridge erupted in cheers, but Elara didn't smile. She knew this wasn't the end. The Zorth would be back, and so would whoever in the Alliance was helping them. Mason turned to her. Captain, if we can do this once, we can do it again. We could make the rift our hunting ground. Elara looked back at the shimmering expanse, the light of it dancing in her eyes. They think we're prey, she said softly. Let's show them what happens when prey fights back. The rift pulsed again, as if it had heard her. The horizon's reach returned to the nearest Alliance outpost, a quiet station orbiting the pale moon of Histara 4. From a distance, the station looked peaceful, its silver rings spinning slowly against the black. But as the docking clamps locked and the airlock hissed open, Elara could feel the tension. Soldiers stood stiff at their posts. No one smiled. Inside the command hub, the Alliance insignia glowed above the central table. A Vorathi officer waited, her translucent skin catching the light like frost. She didn't waste time on greetings. Captain Vance, you are ordered to hand over all navigation logs and tactical data from your recent rift engagement. Elara kept her expression calm. Those logs are still under review by my science team. The Vorathi's voice was cold. That is not acceptable. The council requires them now. Something in her tone made Elara's skin prickle. She had heard that voice before, not the words, but the way they were spoken, it was the voice of someone who wasn't asking for information. They were demanding it for someone else. Later, in the dim light of the crew quarters, Mason Hale spoke in a low voice. "I'd been listening to station chatter. 2 days before we arrived, a cargo transport left here for Alliance Command. But it didn't go straight to Devara Prime. It detoured. Right into Zorth space." Ilara's jaw tightened. "You're saying the Alliance gave them something?" Mason's eyes were hard. "Or someone in the Alliance did. I'd bet my last credit that they're the ones feeding the Zorth our roots." Kira Sol joined them, a small data chip in her hand. I copied a fragment of the station's encrypted transmissions. "It's messy, but I think I can clean it up. If we can prove there's a leak, maybe the Council will listen." Ilara shook her head slowly. "If the Council is the leak, bringing them proof will only paint targets on our backs." That night cycle, Ilara walked alone through the empty docking bay. Her boots echoed on the metal floor. Through the wide bay windows, she could see the moon below, its surface pale and lifeless. She thought about the Zorth, about the way they had moved in perfect formation, about how quickly they had found the horizon's reach after every jump. That wasn't luck. That wasn't skill. That was someone whispering in their ear. The more she thought about it, the more one thing became clear. The Alliance didn't just underestimate humanity. They were willing to sacrifice them. The next morning, orders arrived from Devara Prime. The message was brief. "Horizon's reach is reassigned to convoy duty. You will escort supply ships to the Tyros sector. Avoid all combat with Zorth forces. These orders are final." Mason read it aloud, then slammed the datapad down on the table. "They're sending us away from the front, again, while the Zorth rip through our defenses." Kira's voice was quiet but firm. "They want us where we can't interfere. If the Zorth take the Tyros sector, the rift will be surrounded." Ilara stood at the head of the table, looking at her crew. "If we follow these orders, the war will be lost before we even fire another shot." She let the silence stretch. The faces looking back at her weren't just officers. They were humans who had seen the rift's power. Humans who had survived when no one thought they would. "The Alliance doesn't believe in us," she continued. "The Zorth think we're prey. I say, we fight this war our way." There was a long pause. Then Mason spoke. "You're talking about disobeying direct orders." Ilara met his gaze. "I'm talking about saving the Alliance, even if the Alliance doesn't want to be saved." One by one, the crew nodded. No one hesitated. Kira slid the chip across the table. "I've cleaned up the data. It's coordinates, not just our routes, but every ship assigned to Rift Patrol. Whoever's sending these knows exactly who to target." Mason leaned forward. "Then we find the source. And while we're at it, we turn the rift." The Horizon's reach moved through the dark between stars, its engines running low and quiet. From the outside, it looked wounded, panels scorched from earlier battles. One wing of its hull visibly dented, heat signatures kept deliberately faint. It was all part of the plan. Captain Elar Vance stood at the center of the bridge, studying the holographic map floating above the table. The rift glimmered on one side of the display, like a living storm. Around it, Kira Sol's tactical markers showed the gravitational currents she had spent days charting. "The Zorth have one advantage," Kira said, pointing at the enemy's last known positions. "They think they're perfect. They fight like a machine, every move calculated, every formation flawless. But the rift is not flawless. It shifts, without warning, and when it does, their precision will destroy them." Mason Hale leaned back in his seat, eyes narrowed. "So we make them follow us into the currents. We make them think they've got us, and then the rift does the rest." Eli nodded. "The bait will be us. A crippled ship, alone, broadcasting false distress signals. The Zorth will see us as an easy kill. They'll take the chase, and once they're deep enough." She pointed to a flashing point on the map. We collapsed the corridor behind them. The crew fell silent. They all knew the danger. Navigating the rift was like dancing on the edge of a knife. One wrong calculation, and the horizon's reach would vanish into the same void that had claimed so many others. Hours later, the preparations began. Engineering teams deliberately weakened sections of the hull to make battle damage look fresh. The weapons array was powered down, except for 2 concealed launchers, hidden in the ship's belly. Kira fed false distress calls into the CUM system, desperate pleas for help, carefully encrypted so only Zorth interceptors would detect them. Message sent, she reported. If they're watching, they'll come. Alara watched the void ahead. Oh, they're watching. The waiting was the hardest part. Every hour, Mason adjusted the ship's heading by tiny degrees, keeping them on course for the rift, while staying just slow enough to look like a struggling vessel. Crew members spoke in low voices, every sound amplified by the quiet hum of the ship. In the mess hall, some tried to eat, though no one had much appetite. Others checked their gear, flight suits, mag boots, survival packs, in case the worst happened. Ilara moved among them, speaking to each crew member by name. She reminded them of what they'd done before, of the battles they'd already survived. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held the same steel that had carried them through the rift once already. We've been underestimated since the day we joined the Alliance, she told them. Let them keep underestimating us. That's when we hit hardest. The trap was sprung sooner than expected. Captain, Kira said sharply from her station, we've got incoming. 4 Zorth destroyers. 6 escorts. Intercept course. Mason's mouth twisted into a grin. They took the bait. The Zorth ships appeared on the main screen minutes later, sleek black hulls cutting through the dark, glowing green engines leaving trails like comet tails. They moved in their perfect, unnerving synchrony, each one turning and accelerating. At the same instant, to them, the horizon's reach was just another crippled prey animal. Ilara's voice was steady. Maintain course. Keep the engines at 70%. We want them close, but not suspicious. The enemy drew nearer. The hum of the Zorth's formation pulsed faintly through the ship's sensors, an alien rhythm that made the hair on the back of the neck rise. Kira monitored their position. They're matching our speed. Range closing. Mason tapped the controls gently, as if coaxing the ship through water. Just a little closer, friends. The rift began to fill the viewport, a swirling wall of shifting colors and bending. Light. To most crews, it was a sight to fear. To the humans aboard the Horizon's Reach, it was a chance. Alara watched the enemy ships on the tactical display. They're committed. Once we pass the first current, there's no way for them to turn back without breaking formation. Kira's fingers danced across her console. The first shift will hit in 45 seconds. That's when we start. The collapse. The Zorth pushed harder now, sensing the kill. Plasma charges streaked past the human ship, bright flashes illuminating the rift's edge. One bolt grazed the hull, making the ship shudder perfectly on script. Alara didn't flinch. Hold steady. The rift's gravitational tides began to swell. The stars beyond stretched and warped, their light bending into strange shapes. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure, a deep metallic sound that echoed through the decks. Kira counted down. 5, 4, 3. At 1, Ilara gave the order. Now, the hidden launchers under the Horizon's Reach fired 2 ion torpedoes, not at the enemy, but at the rift's currents themselves. The explosions sent ripples of distortion through space, collapsing the stable corridor the Zorth were using to follow. Suddenly, their perfect formation shattered. One destroyer swerved to avoid a current and slammed into an escort, the impact blooming into a fireball. Another was caught by a gravitational eddy and spun out of control, disappearing into the rift's depths. The hunters had just realized the prey had teeth. On the bridge, Mason's hands moved with speed, born of instinct, guiding the horizons. Reach through the narrow safe path Kira had charted. Current shift in 3 seconds, Kira shouted. The human ship slipped through, riding the tide like a surfer on a wave. Behind them, chaos reigned, Zorth ships twisting, colliding, vanishing into the storm. When the turbulence eased, only 4 enemy ships remained. They turned sharply and fled into hyperspace, leaving the rift once more in quiet, deadly beauty. The crew erupted in cheers. Mason turned to Elara. That was perfect. Elara didn't smile. It was practice. The real fight is coming. Her eyes stayed fixed on the rift, as if she could see the war waiting just beyond its glow. The rift was no longer just a strange border in space. It had become a battlefield. The horizon's reach plunged deeper into the shifting colors and twisting currents. Outside, light bent into strange arcs, as if reality itself were bending around them. The crew felt the subtle pull of gravity moving in impossible directions, making their stomachs turn. Elara Vance stood in the center of the bridge, hands gripping the railing as the ship swayed. Every nerve in her body was alert. Report, Kira. Sol scanned her console, eyes flicking across dozens of readouts. 3 Zorth destroyers still on pursuit, 1 escort. They're adapting, changing formation to deal with the currents. Mason Hale gave a humorless chuckle. Good. Let them adapt. The faster they think they've figured it out, the harder we hit. The rift's gravitational waves pulsed, and the deck under their feet shuddered. It was like sailing a wooden ship through a storm, except the waves here could tear steel in half. Down in engineering, Chief Rourke barked orders as his team stabilized the energy cores. Keep the output steady. If we spike too hard, the rift will tear us apart. Sweat ran down his face, but there was a strange calm in his voice. These were humans. Storm weather was in their blood. On the main display, the Zorth ships were still there, dark, perfect shapes, cutting through the chaos. Their green plasma weapons fired in measured bursts, each one calculated. No wasted energy. A bolt slammed into the horizon's reach's aft shield. The ship groaned. Sparks flew from a panel on Kira's station, but she didn't look away from her readouts. Shields at 64%. Elara made her choice. We stop running. The crew turned toward her, some wide-eyed. Mason raised an eyebrow. You mean, turn and fight? In the rift? Exactly, she said. This is our home now, and they don't know the rules here. Kira understood first. The currents, the eddies, we can use them as cover, as weapons. Elara's eyes hardened. We're going to turn the rift into a trap they can't escape. The ship slowed deliberately. The Zorth moved closer, sensing what they thought was weakness. Their formation tightened, like a predator curling in for the strike. Elara gave the first order. Mason, bring us between currents Theta 7 and Gamma 9. Mason's hands danced across the controls. The ship dipped sharply to the left, sliding into a narrow channel between 2 invisible walls of shifting gravity. The sensors screamed warnings, but the humans knew the path. Kira had mapped it days ago. The first Zorth destroyer followed, and that was its mistake. A gravitational surge swept through the channel, twisting the current sideways. The human ship skimmed the edge of safety, but the Zorth craft wasn't fast enough. Its sleek hull scraped the current's edge, and in an instant, the ship was torn apart. Vanishing in a burst of light, the crew of the Horizon's Reach didn't cheer. They had no time. 2 destroyers left, Kira said, and they're getting angry. Plasma fires streaked past, one bolt striking dangerously close to the bridge. The impact rattled everyone in their seats. Elara leaned forward. Mason, bring us up into current Delta 12. On my mark, dive straight through the eddy. That'll sling us right into the rift's core, Mason warned. Exactly, she replied. The Zorth followed, relentless. Their weapons glowed brighter, charging for a full barrage. 3, 2, 1 now. Mason slammed the controls forward. The horizon's reach dropped into the swirling eddy. Gravity twisted violently, pulling the ship in 3 directions at once. Every muscle in the crew's bodies strained against the force. For a moment, they were weightless. Then the ship shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. Behind them, the horizon's reach floated at the edge of the rift.com for the first time in hours. The crew worked quietly, patching minor hull damage and recalibrating the engines. Outside, the swirling currents shimmered like molten glass, a reminder of the power they had just survived. Ilara Vance didn't rest. She stood at the bridge viewport, watching the sensors. Her mind raced, already thinking 3 moves ahead. "Captain," Kira Sol said, pointing at the tactical display. "Multiple hyperspace jumps detected. The Zorth, they're bringing reinforcements." Ilara's jaw tightened. "How many?" "At least 20 destroyers, dozens of escorts," Kira replied. "They've learned from the last fight. This time, they won't underestimate us." Mason Hale whistled softly. 20? They're about to learn why humans are hard to catch. The horizon's reach sent out encrypted signals to nearby Alliance patrols, hoping for backup. Some ships answered hesitantly, their commanders wary after the Rift incident. Others refused outright, unwilling to challenge the Zorth. Ilara turned to her crew. "We don't wait for permission. We lead. That's what humans do. We fight where the others hesitate." A wave of resolve passed through the bridge. They had survived the Rift's heart, and now they would show the Zorth the cost of underestimating humanity. The first wave of Zorth reinforcements appeared on sensors. Their formation was tight, disciplined, a wall of green light, and lethal. Intent, Mason leaned forward. "They've learned to anticipate our moves. We can't rely on the Rift alone this time." Ilara nodded. "Then we make our own rules." She activated the ship's tactical overlay. Hidden weapons, ion disruptors, and decoy drones were all ready. Every crew member knew their role by heart. "Kira," Ilara said, "prepare the Rift corridors. Every current, every eddy, we turn them into a gauntlet." Kira's fingers flew over the controls. "It's complicated. The Zorth know the Rift better than we thought. But we can create false paths, leading them into traps. They'll never see it coming." The battle began before the humans even expected it. Plasma fire lit the void, green bolts streaking past as Zorth destroyers probed their defenses. One hit a shield generator, sending sparks flying across the bridge. Crew members were thrown from their seats, but Ilara's voice remained calm. "Hold positions. Target the nearest destroyer with ion disruptors. Let's slow them down." The horizon's reach fired, not to destroy, but to disable. The first Zorth ship shuddered, engines flickering as the human tech jammed its systems. "One down, 20 to go," Mason muttered with a grin. Ilara guided the ship through the Rift's labyrinthine corridors. Currents shifted violently, threatening to crush them at every turn. But humans adapted quickly. "Follow my lead," she called. "Every move counts. If we fail here, it's over." The Zorth fleet followed blindly, assuming their experience gave them the advantage. But the humans were clever. Hidden decoys, sudden current shifts, and surprise ion blasts tore through the enemy formation. Destroyers collided with each other, while escorts were flung into gravitational eddies. "They think they're hunting," Kira said, voice tense. "But they're the ones in the trap now." Hours passed. The battle raged with light and sound, a deadly symphony of lasers, eddies, and collapsing ships. Every crew member on the horizon's reach moved with precision, coordinating like a single organism. Mason fired the concealed launchers, striking enemy ships that had broken formation. Sparks and debris filled the rift, illuminating the swirling colors. "Captain," Kira said, voice almost in awe, "they're starting to retreat." Ilara didn't relax. "Not yet. We push them. We show them humans don't just survive, we dominate." The human strategy worked. One by one, the Zorth ships fell into the trap corridors. Destroyers became tangled in currents, spinning helplessly. Escorts collided or were dragged into the rift's deadly vortices. Through it all, the Horizon's reach remained agile, moving like a predator through its own hunting ground. Mason shouted over the alarms. "They're breaking. They're scattering." "Good," LRS said. "Now we hit them where it hurts." The flagship? The Zorth flagship appeared, massive and imposing, its hull glowing ominously green. It was slower than the rest, trying to maneuver around the eddies. "We've been waiting for this," Alara whispered. The ship's hidden ion torpedoes fired, striking the flagship's shields in multiple locations. Plasma bolts ripped through its armor as the rift's currents twisted around it, pushing it toward a collapsing channel. Mason's hands flew across the controls. All currents aligned. It's falling right into the rift's core. The flagship twisted, engines screaming, then disappeared into the swirling void. The remaining Zorth ships retreated in disarray, leaving the battlefield eerily quiet. On the Horizon's reach, the crew finally allowed themselves to breathe. Exhausted, covered in sweat and grease, they stared out at the rift. The stormy colors reflected their determination and triumph. "They underestimated us," Mason said softly, still in disbelief. "They always do," Alara replied. "And every time they do, humanity proves them wrong." Kira smiled faintly. "The rift, it saved us once, but we used it to save ourselves now. We became the hunters." Alara placed a hand on the viewport. "This is just the beginning. The Zorth will return, and the Alliance may still betray us. But we've shown them one truth." The crew leaned closer. She continued, her voice calm but carrying weight. "Humans do not break. Humans do not surrender. And humans always find a way." The rift pulsed in response, light bending around their ship like it acknowledged their victory. For the first time, the universe seemed to pause and take notice of humanity. The Horizon's reach drifted in the quiet aftermath of the battle. Stars glimmered like distant diamonds, but the rift still pulsed in the distance, a living storm waiting for its next challenge. The crew moved through the ship silently, repairing minor damage, checking systems, and tending to bruised bodies. Ilara Vance remained on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the rift. She could feel it, like a heartbeat in space, and she knew the war was far from over. "Captain," Kira Sol said, voice tense, "I've analyzed the Zorth retreat. They're regrouping. They've probably sent word back to their fleet. A full-scale invasion could be coming." Mason Hale's hands hovered over the controls. "We've beaten them once. We can do it again. But next time, we'll need more than the rift to help us." Alara nodded slowly. "Exactly. And that's why we'll do what no one else can." The plan was risky, daring, and almost insane. They would lure the Zorth into the rift again, deeper this time, where even their strongest ships could not navigate. But the humans would use not just technology, but instinct, creativity, and adaptability, things the Zorth could never predict. "This isn't just about survival anymore," Ilara said. "It's about showing the universe who we really are." The crew absorbed her words in silence. There was fear, yes, but also determination. Humans had been underestimated for centuries, and now, they would turn that assumption into their greatest weapon. The next jump brought them close to the rift's inner core. Light twisted violently around them. Gravity pulsed in unpredictable ways, threatening to crush the ship at any moment. "Hold steady," Mason warned, sweat beading on his forehead. Kira's hands flew across her console. "I've created a series of false channels and hidden eddies. The Zorth will see only one path, the one we want them to take." Ilara's gaze remained steady, and that path leads straight to their destruction. The enemy appeared on sensors in full force. More than 40 ships, destroyers, escorts, even heavy cruisers. They moved in perfect formation, confident, lethal, and deadly precise. They think they know us, Elara said softly. Let's prove they don't. The horizon's reach slipped through the rift's currents, small but fast. The humans used every trick, every instinct honed through years of adversity. Hidden drones distracted the Zorth sensors, while shifting currents twisted their formation. The enemy ships fired blindly, some colliding with others, or being dragged into eddies. It's working, Mason muttered. They can't keep up. Hours passed. The Zorth fleet tightened, desperate to trap the humans, but the rift shifted, faster than any calculation could predict. Kira guided the horizon's reach through narrow gaps no algorithm could replicate. Her mind racing with human intuition, pattern recognition, and split-second decisions. Captain, she said, voice tense. The flagship is lagging behind. It's alone. Elara's eyes gleamed. Good. That's our target. The humans struck with precision. Concealed ion torpedoes disabled the flagship's shields. Currents twisted around it, bending gravity to crush its engines. The ship writhed, twisting violently, and then was caught in a collapse of the rift's currents, vanishing in a flash of distorted light. The remaining Zorth ships hesitated, fear entering their perfect calculations for the first time. They're panicking, Mason said. Yes, Elara said. And now, we show them what humans can do. Elara gave one final command. The horizon's reach maneuvered through a network of eddies, each crew member performing their role flawlessly. Decoy drones, timed plasma bursts, gravitational manipulations, all combined to create chaos the Zorth could not predict. One by one, the remaining enemy ships were destroyers collided, escorts flung into eddies, cruisers torn apart by the rift's gravity. Through it all, the humans moved like dancers, precise as creative, unpredictable. At the end, the rift lay quiet once more. The enemy fleet was destroyed or scattered,